Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Warlords of Draenor Beta preview video. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the new 5-man dungeons coming with Warlords of Draenor, and this dungeon goes by the name of the Iron Docks. Now this dungeon's got a total of 4 bosses, and just like with our other dungeon previews, all we're going to be doing today is taking a look at the abilities and how the fight roughly works on beta as it is at the minute, and then closer to the release date of Warlords of Draenor, we'll release a full written and video guide. First boss in this dungeon goes by the name of Fleshrender Norkgar, I believe that's how you pronounce it anyway, and he will be riding atop his mount who goes by the name of Dreadfang. Now we're going to look at Dreadfang's abilities first because he has a key one which goes by the name of Bloodletting Howl, and this means that Dreadfang's howl will cause his allies, aka the Fleshrender, to regenerate 1% of their maximum health every second. So in layman's terms, that basically means you kill Dreadfang first and then you kill the Fleshrender. You won't be able to kill the Fleshrender because he'll be healing too much. Dreadfang does have 2 other abilities that you'll have to deal with, and they go by the name of Savage Mauling, which calls him to snarl and leap towards his prey, mauling them savagely, reducing movement speed by 45% and inflicting a moderate amount of physical damage every 1 second for 6 seconds, and his other ability, which is called Shredding Swipes, which causes Dreadfang to lunge forward, gnawing everyone caught in his path, inflicting a very high amount of physical damage. You simply need to heal through the Savage Mauling ability and use cooldowns as and when needed, and then move away from him when he's casting his Shredding Swipes. Now, throughout the fight, Fleshrender Norgak will cast an ability called Burning Arrows, which causes Norkgar to howl and signal the Gromkar Flameslingers to launch a continuous volley of flaming arrows, which leave a burning trail on the ground. Now, this fire does inflict quite a high amount of damage, and we found that the best way to avoid this was to just keep on moving when he was casting his burning arrows. Now, he's got another ability called Reckless Provocation, I believe that's called, and this will cause him to howl an intimidating war song, and if you attack him while this ability is active, then it will cause you to be feared. Now, what you'll probably see in the video in the background is at some point he decides he's just going to walk over and hit me a few times. That's because the DK tank was hitting him as he was casting this ability and got feared as a consequence of that. And his final ability is called Barbed Arrow Barrage, and this again causes him to howl. He really likes this howling business, and signal the Gromkar archers to release a barrage of arrows that again will rain down from above, inflicting a high amount of physical damage. Once again, we found it was just easier to move away from the areas and just keep on moving as this ability was going off. The second boss in this dungeon is another council style encounter, and they go by the name of the Grimrail Enforcers. However, unlike some council style fights, these bosses do not share a health pool. The first boss is called Ariok Dugru, I believe, and his first ability is called Sanguine Sphere, and this causes him to summon an orb of blood in order to protect her most injured ally, and this orb will absorb 100,000 damage. Now, if this damage is broken, so if you do deal 100,000 damage to whoever the orb is on, the ability Abrupt Restoration will break, and this will cause a surge of power to be released, and it will heal 5% of the maximum health for that NPC every second for 3 seconds. His second ability is called Tainted Blood, and this causes him to manifest a foul toxin that will ravage your body, inflicting a moderate amount of nature damage every second for 10 seconds. Unfortunately, this isn't noted as dispellable, so you're just going to have to heal through the damage. The next council member goes by the name of Makog Emberblade, and his first ability is called Flaming Slash, and this causes Makog to dash forward, spinning his massive blade, inflicting a high amount of fire damage to anyone that gets hit by it. Simply move away from this ability in order to not take its damage. His next ability is called Lava Sweep, and this causes him to slash his burning blade with ferocity and conjure crashing waves of lava, which again inflict a high amount of fire damage if you are to get hit by them, so simply move away when they're coming towards you. And the final council member is called Nissa Hightower Knox, and her first ability is called Malfunctioning Jumper Cables 9000 Extra Large, and this causes her jumper cables to crackle and release a chain of lightning which inflicts a moderate amount of nature damage to 3 enemies. This is something you've simply got to heal through. And her next ability is called Ogre Traps, and this causes Nissa to anticipate your movements and carefully calibrate her trap launcher, flinging 8 Ogre Traps around your feet. Now if you walk into one of these Ogre Traps, the ability Shredded Tendons will be triggered, and this will cause the trap to snap closed around your ankles, slowing your movement speed by 15% and inflicting a small amount of damage every 1 second for 7 seconds. The third boss in this dungeon goes by the name of O'Shea. However, he was either very bugged or, just not working as intended when I recorded this video, and it's still like this at the minute. He just kind of didn't really do much, but he does have abilities he deals at you, so I'll go through them, but there's not really much of a video to go with it, unfortunately. His first ability is called Time to Feed, and this causes O'Shea to savagely bite his victim and leap away from the battlefield, taking his prey, preparing to feast upon them when he returns. Now, this ability has a sub-ability called Feeding Frenzy, which is an interruptible ability, and this causes O'Shea to enter a feeding frenzy, and he must be damaged for a percentage of his maximum health in order to release his victim. Now, while he is biting on his victim, he will be using the ability Time to Feed, and this causes him to pin his prey to the ground and deal 25,000 physical damage every 5 seconds for 20 seconds. His next ability is called Adrenalized Roar, and this causes him to roar fiercely, inflicting a high amount of physical damage to all nearby enemies and additional physical damage to the farther away enemies are from him, up to a maximum of around 85,000-86,000 damage. So the closer you are to the boss, the less damage you're going to take from that ability. His next ability is called Rend Flesh, and this causes him to flail wildly, slashing all enemies within 10 yards for a very high amount of physical damage. Simply move away from him when he's casting this ability in order to avoid the damage. And his final ability is called Primal Assault, and this causes him to charge towards his prey, brutally mauling enemies in his path for a high amount of physical damage. Just don't get caught between the path between him and the prey, and you're not going to take any unnecessary damage. And the final boss in this dungeon goes by the name of Skullock, and he is the son of Gruul. Now during this fight, there are 3 or 4 things you're going to have to deal with mainly, and this is the cannon that's there, a guy called Captain Koromar, First Mate Zogosh, and also Skullock himself. Now, the cannon throughout the fight will barrage the enemies, which is you, the players, with cannons, inflicting a high amount of damage and reducing your movement speed when you get hit by them by a significant amount. Now, while these cannons are firing, you're also going to have to deal with Captain Koromar, who's going to cast Berserker Leap, which will cause him to crash down on enemy targets, inflicting a moderate amount of nature damage to anyone within 8 yards of his landing point. So simply don't be standing near it and you won't take the damage. He'll cast an ability called Shattering Blade, which causes him to skim his blade across the ground, causing melee sparks that inflict a moderate amount of fire damage to anyone that's within the area of effect. Again, try and avoid being in the area of effect in order to not take the damage. And also a final ability called Blade Storm, which causes him to attack in a whirl of steel, causing 200% weapon damage to each enemy within melee range. Once again, another fight that melee are going to thoroughly enjoy. And the final mob in this fight is First Mate Zogosh, and he'll cast an ability called Rapid Fire, and this causes him to focus on a single enemy, rapidly firing at them and all enemies standing in between for a high amount of fire damage every half a second. If you think about the aim on the Paragons of the Galaxy encounter, it works a little bit like that. However, you want people to move out of the line instead of standing in it. Now what you'll also notice is that throughout this fight we're also getting knocked back, and when we get knocked back it is Skullock that is knocking us back, and you need to kind of avoid the cannonballs that are being fired at you. So what you have to do is you have to use these kind of walls that are up. I guess they're walls, kind of defensive things that have been randomly placed on this boat in order to avoid the damage that is going to come towards you. And you have to slowly move progressively up the boat in order to get back to the Adze and Skullock and the other members of his crew in order to kill them off and complete the dungeon. So that's going to do it for this Warlords of Draenor dungeon preview video. If you are interested in future previews such as this one, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel. Alternatively, if you'd like to keep up to date with all of the latest Warlords of Draenor news, then please do feel free to head on over to flaskup.com. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.